Filmmaking is a strange combination between business and art, often reliant on ticket sales to cover the huge costs of producing a film. But what if we're trying to produce our own films on a low budget? As part of this Making a Short Film series, this week we're going to answer 3 questions about money. Which things were the priority for spending? What would we have done if we'd had half as much money to spend? And finally, where did the money come from? So the budget for this short film was far more than I've ever spent on anything, £8,000. And the reason for that was one very expensive decision. This time, let's actually pay most of the people who were helping with the project. That's where 87% of the money went. Let's break it down. The producer and the writer were both really gracious about their fees, since they don't have 10 years of professional experience under their belt, and neither do I. Next was a casting director who did a better job at finding actors in 2 days than I would have in weeks. Then we paid our actors roughly £100 per shooting day, and just under half that for non-speaking roles. We also hired a first AD to be in charge of the logistics on set, keeping everything running smoothly. We spent the biggest chunk on an experienced sound recordist and boom operator, because I believe that on every single film project, a big portion of your time and a big portion of your money should go towards the sound. We were very grateful that our director of photography, costume designer, behind the scenes shooter, and our production assistant were all willing to donate their time to the project in true independent filmmaking spirit. So we made sure that everyone, especially those volunteering, would get tea, coffee, and food on set, which costs quite a lot over a 4-day shoot. Not everyone lived in Manchester where we were filming, so we needed 4 cheap hotel rooms for 4 nights, and we also reimbursed all travel costs throughout the shoot. And finally, whenever you're employing someone, you need insurance in case someone gets hurt. But is all of this really necessary? There is a whole lot of unpaid work going around in filmmaking, and while it's true there's absolutely nothing wrong with getting some friends together and going out and shooting something for free, that's what I've always done. But looking back at my previous projects, I could have actually paid them if I wasn't spending all of my earnings on filmmaking equipment. So this time it felt right that the budget went to the people involved rather than spending half the money on renting an Arri Alexa with some sweet lenses. The last 13% of the budget was split up like this. Click pause now if you want to look at this in detail. We didn't spend anything on production equipment, we just used my gear, including the Canon T3i that I bought 3 years ago. We borrowed all of the props for free, and then Video Europe hooked us up with some free rentals. But looking back, you always wonder where you could have saved some money. For example, we spent a pretty big chunk of the budget to have a police officer on set for an evening. Now, I honestly don't know if that was being over precautious, but when you hear about these horror stories from people messing around with fake guns, which we were going to be doing that, having fake guns in public, then it did seem like the right thing to do. But as ever, we went way over budget, which meant there was literally no money to spend on post-production. Lesson learned. So what if we'd had half as much to spend? We probably would have shot it locally to save on accommodation and travel, which means we would have lost the great Manchester accent and those locations. On that budget, we would still feed everyone, but we'd only have 1 paid crew member, a less expensive and less experienced sound recordist. Working with non-professionals probably would have meant that each scene would just take a bit longer to film, and I would have had to do a lot more micromanaging, you know, telling people exactly where to put the microphone, for example, because they haven't got years of experience. It would have worked, we could have done it, but it would have just been a bit more rough around the edges. But now for the big question, where does the money come from? Now, I wish I could just give you someone's email address and you just apply for how much money you wanted and they'd write your check without expecting anything back, but that's pretty unlikely. There are usually a few distribution deals available where investors or studios would front you the production costs so they can then sell the film and keep the profit. But these deals don't come easy, and it's often just the very few best filmmakers from the best film festivals who get them. Of course, there's crowdfunding if you have lots of people who liked your previous work enough that they are willing to pay a little bit to make the next one happen. But building an audience also takes a lot of time and effort, and there's no guaranteed results. So there's no simple way to get your film funded. Just like the saying, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it. So for this project, I actually chose the third option, which I think is the one that's most accessible to most people, and that is self-funding your film. So after making these episodes every week for 3 years, I'm almost at minimum wage from the ad revenue and the few little sponsorships. So that's income, and because I'm still in school and live at home, my living costs are super low. I also work hard to keep my non-essential spending extremely low. I'm not into gadgets and I cycle everywhere instead of having a car. Which means that even though what I'm earning each month is below average, 95% of it can go straight into the film. And so after more than 6 months of saving, we had a budget. However, I'm fully aware that most people simply can't put 95% of their income into their film projects. I won't be able to forever. I want to move out. I'd like to have kids one day, and all of that stuff increases your essential spending. And what if I was paying to have the latest smartphone upgrades, maybe going on holiday every once in a while? Very quickly, it can look as if there's no money left for the film projects. But unless you're literally in poverty, the chances are you can reduce your spending if you're willing to make sacrifices. It could mean going out to restaurants less often, even living somewhere with cheaper rent. It's your choice what you give up and how long you save for. I'm not saying it's easy, but it is possible. So why would you cut down your costs and save up for so long just to spend a lot of money on a film that you release for free, only making a bit of revenue from the behind the scenes? Well, during this project, I've learned so much. Done plenty of networking and actually rediscovered my love for making films. And it all cost less than a year's tuition at college. That seems worth it to me. My name's Simon Cade, this has been DSLR Guide, and I'll see you next week.